Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily devotions on this second day of the third week of Advent. And just a couple of things to remind folks of. First of all, I'd love you to get in some of those pictures of your Christmas lights, whether that's inside or outside your house. If you can send them in to me, we don't have that many yet, and so we're leaving it for another week. If we can get them together for this Sunday, we'd love to show them this Sunday morning. So please do get those into me on WhatsApp. Then the second thing is we are doing some carol singing down at Nash's this Thursday evening. We've got about half a dozen people at the minute involved in that, but if you would like to be involved, would love to have a couple more. We will be socially distanced and we will be safe, and we will be trying to keep everybody safe as we do that. But it would be good to be able to share these carols and this witness with the folks who are down there this Thursday night in that pop-up event. And then on Sunday, just a reminder of our nativity and our carol services, and they are happening as usual, although they'll be slightly different this year. The nativity service is slightly different, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And then the carol service, again, slightly different, the usual traditional carols with a few other pieces thrown in. So please do think about coming to either of those services. Choose the one that you think would be best for you, and please do come along and join with us as we celebrate Christmas time. We're looking at Matthew chapter 1 as we go through these devotions this week. And yesterday, you remember, we had a look at the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. And we read through that long list of names and all the people who were involved in that. And we're going to stay in that genealogy this morning, but we're not going to read through the long list of names this morning, because that was exhausting enough for me and probably for you as well. But instead, what we're going to do is pick out some of those names. And they're particularly important names that are included in this genealogy. They're important because they are women. So let me read the different parts of it to you. We'll start off at the beginning. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. It goes on in verse 5. Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. And then at the end of the passage it says this: Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. Women in Matthew's day were really not regarded as persons in their own right. They had no legal standing. They would have been regarded as the property of their father up until they were married, and from then on of their husband. They were totally unimportant, so much so that the average Jewish male would have had a prayer when he woke up in the mornings, which said something along the lines of, thank God that I am not a Gentile, a slave, or a woman. That's how unimportant women were considered to be in those days. And yet in the genealogy of Jesus here in Matthew mentions 5 women. One of them, of course, is Mary. But the 4 others are in there for significant reasons. They are in there to demonstrate something about God. So we need to know a little bit about who they are, who these women were. Tamar is mentioned first, who had Perez and Zerah by Judah. Tamar was Judah's daughter-in-law. She was married to 2 actually of his sons, one after the other, and both of them treated her pretty badly, particularly the second son, Onan, who just treated her like nothing. So much so that she couldn't have a child through Onan, and so she seduced her own father-in-law, Judah, in order to be able to have children. She disguised herself as a prostitute and slept with her father-in-law in order to have these children. It's a pretty pretty horrible story in the middle of Genesis. And then you have Rahab. Rahab is the prostitute from Canaan, the one who, you remember, hangs the red rope outside of her window so that the spies know who it was that protected them whenever they came into Canaan in the first place, and so they're able to tell the troops to leave that house alone. Rahab was a prostitute. She was an outsider. She would have been unacceptable in polite society. Ruth wasn't even a Jew. She was a Moabite widow. She came back from Moab with her Israelite mother-in-law Naomi after they had all been widowed. So again, someone who was an outsider, someone with no real standing in the community, coming in but taking shelter, as she says herself, under the wings of Yahweh. And then we have Bathsheba, or Uriah's wife, as she's described by Matthew, the woman who was seduced by King David and who produced one son who then died, and then David's son Solomon, who went on to be king. And then at the very end of the list we have Mary, who hasn't done anything in comparison to any of these other women, but who is just an insignificant teenager from an out-of-the-way town called Nazareth. These 5 women who are part of this story of the Christ coming into the world, what do they tell us? What do they demonstrate to us? Well, they tell us that the Christ who is coming is all about breaking down barriers, that the gospel is all about breaking down barriers between men and women. These women are raised to the importance of having a place in the genealogy of Jesus. Breaking down barriers between Jew and Gentile, Ruth the Moabitess, Rahab the Canaanite, both included within this genealogy of Jesus. The barriers between Jew and non-Jew, Jew and Gentile, are being broken down right at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel. And even the barriers between those who would be considered good and those who would be considered bad. There's nothing that we know of in Mary's record that makes her a particularly bad person. Nothing we know of in Ruth's record that makes her a particularly bad person either. But then we have Tamar and Rahab, who were engaged in activities that were very dodgy, and we have Bathsheba, who we presume was a willing participant in David's adultery. All of those come together to be part of this genealogy. And so what's being said is that God has come into the world in the person of Christ to call sinners to himself. Both Mary and Ruth were also sinners, maybe not on such a grand scale as the others, but they were sinners too. And whatever our perception of good and bad is, God sees beyond that. God sees people, men and women, Jew and Gentile, made in the image of God. That image distorted and broken by sin, but that image redeemable through Christ. Jesus comes down to break the barriers down between us and God, between men and women, between Jew and Gentile, between those we might consider as sinners and those we might consider as righteous, the way the Pharisees did in Jesus' day. Jesus comes to break those barriers down, and it already happens, even in Matthew's genealogy. And what's more, God uses all these women in his salvation plan. So what does that tell us? It tells us you are not too poor, too sinful, or too insignificant for God to use in his plans for the world. If you trust in him, he will use you in marvelous ways. Trust that you will know his peace and his presence with you today. God bless.